There's so many great devotions, but we thought, what are ones that are going to, really speak to people we can always learn more about or revived in? So Ellen did a great night on the first night, an overview, and then we had Father Myler on Marian devotion, and then last week was, do you remember? Eucharistic adoration. That's right. And I thought she was so good. Oh my gosh, you could tell she is a Eucharistic person. She lives her devotion to the Eucharist. It was just so powerful and inspiring for me to hear her as well. So it's great. So tonight we're going to reflect on the Stations of the Cross. And I have a lot to cover, but I'm also just going to try to make it prayerful. So I'm going to give some interesting information about it, but then I'm going to have us do like a little prayer experience with the stations about 3/4 the way through. So to start it off, I was like a table discussion. When you think of Stations of the Cross, stations of the cross that you grew up with, some of you who didn't grow up Catholic, what was one of the first Stations of the Cross? In what church were they? Have you visited a Stations of the Cross when you traveled in a different church? So talk at your table just for 2 minutes, briefly. What was an impactful Station of the Cross that you've experienced? And where was that? And why was that impactful? But you only get like 2.5 minutes. So have a table conversation. Okay, let's come back to the larger group. I love how instantly you were able to kind of get into that conversation because it's such an important part of our Catholic devotional life, the Stations of the Cross, and really impactful ones that we've been to. Probably two of my highlights, been able to lead quite a few pilgrimages to Fatima, and they have, if you haven't been there, but in Fatima, they have outdoor stations. And you walk to Calvary in Fatima. It's about an hour and a half walk. They're almost life-size, but you're going uphill the whole time, and you get to the Calvary, and there's a whole chapel up there, and that sort of thing. It's usually a hot, sweaty day, and you get an experience of walking all the way to Calvary, and because that Fatima, that part of Portugal, is very deserty too, so it's dry and dusty. So it's just interesting to have a variety from outdoor stations to beautiful ones we've seen in different churches as well. So when I was trying to think, what's the big picture of Stations of the Cross? And we have to connect it with, so I need to do a brief overview of when we talk about, I'm going to do two things tonight. I'm going to talk about how to connect the Stations of the Cross with the stations in our lives, and then how we connect them with the Paschal mystery of Jesus. Because this is always our goal, which happens at the Mass, and this is our life, living the Paschal mystery. So I'm going to be, that's the two sort of main things I want to focus on. When we say the word Paschal mystery, it's oftentimes said in Mass, and I'm thinking, I wonder if people, are getting that. Some of you, not to, doubt your spiritual, but we just kind of use that word, the Paschal candle. So Paschal means like lamb, so Lamb of God, and then mystery, of course, is the mystery of everything that Jesus is, his life, his suffering, death, resurrection, and ascension. So all of those are in the Paschal mystery, and all of those are woven into the Mass as well. And so the Stations of the Cross are a devotion that, like all the devotions we heard about on the first Mass, they're meant to point us to the Eucharist and flow from the Eucharist. So even Eucharistic adoration, you mentioned that last time. So it should lead us to, and then especially here at St. Clare, we're very clear that Eucharistic adoration flows out of the Mass. It's always done at the end of Mass there as well. So devotions, that's what they're supposed to do. Take you to the climax of our prayer in the Holy Mass, and then they should flow out and enrich our lives as well. And so that's why we got to talk about the Paschal mystery, suffering, death, and resurrection, how the Stations are going to lead us to that, and then we reflect more on them when we leave the Mass. So do a devotion to the Stations before and after, but it's all connected to that. Does that make sense so far? So this Paschal mystery there. And I think that, in my own experience, like as a pastor and you all, because you're so involved in ministry in our parish as well, it amazes me how often people, you, myself, our families, that we live in the middle of the Paschal mystery day in and day out, don't we? And so that's what I want to help us connect with. Every time I'm going through some new trial, some new suffering, some new dying to myself, I got to keep connecting that to the Mass, and the Stations can help flesh that out as well. Stations of the Cross there. But I think most people aren't aware of that. When we're right in the middle of something, and it's not just all suffering, but also great news. Like when there is good news, something good happening in your life, connect it to the resurrection. So that's part of the spiritualness. And when we live that spirituality, then whatever experience I'm having at this moment, let's see, where does that fit into Jesus' life of helping others, his suffering, his death, his resurrection, and ascension? That's why the mysteries of the Rosary are so great, too, because they keep drawing us back into the mysteries of Christ's life. But I just don't think we take time to reflect on this station in my life, this experience, how it connects to the Paschal mystery there. I know for myself, why do I believe this so much, not only in my own life and my family that's had, so much suffering today. As a matter of fact, the Mass was for my young sister Rita, who died at 51, 8 years ago from cancer, lung cancer, Rita Duncan. So Mass was for her. So I think about my mom came for the Mass, and she was here for supper. She had to go. But just like that was, our whole family was entrenched into this young woman, being taken by cancer. But for myself as a pastor, if every phone call I receive or text I receive, a person is asking me to walk with them in their sorrow or their dying or maybe a resurrection experience. So I get to hear it from you that you're living the Paschal mystery, and I'm praying for you through that experience when you're sharing with me some experience that you're going on through life. Because one experience is, one phone call is asking me to, matter of fact, 10 minutes before Mass, somebody needs anointed at the colonnades, close to dying as well. So you get those kind of calls, and then right after that, somebody is sharing with me just that they're just in the middle of such pain, going through a divorce, and yet the very next, picture I get either on my phone or someplace is somebody who, just had a baby, or they've been waiting for a pregnancy for years and they finally get pregnant. So it's just that my life, which is sort of exhausting as a priest, but also joyful. It's joyful. But I tell the young guys who are discerning, I said, get ready for your every day is going to be this emotional explosion of complete joy and complete sorrow and sadness and grief as well. So as a pastor, your stories, your lives help keep me grounded in the Paschal mystery too. So when I go up for Mass, you've heard me say this before, when I'm celebrating the Mass, all of your stuff is coming into my heart, and I'm offering it in the Mass as I think about not myself, but I'm thinking about your Paschal mystery of suffering, death, resurrection, all these good things, that for me, I'm taking it all into the Mass and just placing it into Jesus' Paschal mystery as well. So that's how praying the Mass is so powerful for me. But your life stories, the way you're living your faith, living the Paschal mystery, enriches my praying experience. I hope that makes sense. So I want to thank you for that. So as when we think about the Stations of the Cross, we think about that circling a church, and then you do this procession, and we think about it only usually during Lent. But it's really meant to assist people throughout the year. So that's going to be my encouragement, that we as a parish will be praying the Stations more regularly, like the good old days, because people needed them. And we've forgotten how much we need the Stations of the Cross, meaning the devotion of the Stations. And I think that's part of the challenge of us connecting our lives. And just as a church, that's why our staff chose this devotion, helping people develop a devotional life outside of the Mass, before and after, so that it enriches their life. This is the power of devotions that we need in our life. So whether that these Stations of the Cross in our own lives, we have a station. When I say station again, it's like holy moments. So I want you to invite you. If there's one thing you take away from tonight, it's naming some stations in your life that either you have walked down, you're stuck on a certain station right now. I'm talking about your personal lives. Or you're worried about the next station that you're going to be walking to. And if we can kind of be more aware of this, so that every time I'm making a sacrifice to help someone else, I'm at their bedside, or I'm caring for someone, I'm listening to someone patiently, how do I connect that sacrifice of my time, what I'm giving, to the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus that sort of the Stations of the Cross focus on? Okay, so that's kind of an overview of that. But I think we forget to connect what's going on in our lives with Jesus and how to pray. For example, so many parents, young parents particularly, or a parent with a struggling teenager or a young adult, parents go through a lot of struggles, and then I find that parents really struggle of how to see their parenting at whatever stage is your prayer, is your Stations of the Cross. So many will leave, Mass. I felt like I didn't get anything out of it, but then how do I take that moment? Now that, I realize this isn't easy, because you came with my intention, I want to pray this Mass, or I was going to sit down and do the rosary now, and I got a crying baby, or you want to sleep. But how does a parent turn that into their Paschal ministry? Their Station of the Cross right now is caring for that upset baby or whatever it is, and how does that become your prayer? And that's always easier said than done, because it's the same thing. I was told you, pastoring is like parenting too. There are times when, it can seem like just another task, and yet I have to pray through it myself as this is my station of being with this person in their time. So I just want to help you think about this in how you have lived the Stations of the Cross, are living, and we will continue to live that. There's so many ways where we are embodying the Paschal mystery of Jesus. Whether you are caring for an aging parent, loved one, or a spouse, just in that holy moment, being present to that person. You are that woman of Jerusalem comforting Jesus. You are Veronica wiping the face of Jesus. You are Simon helping carry the cross. We have to be, and I know you already know this, but we just need to be reminded that each of these moments are participating in Jesus' stations, with this station at being at a bedside. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of where I'm going to go with kind of the spirituality of this. Now we're going to jump into some history, okay? So switch gears. So history. So first of all, to the right is a picture of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which means the tomb of Jesus. So the origins of this church go all the way back to the 4th century. But I always like to give a lot of credit to St. Helena, who in the 4th century, she makes this pilgrimage from Rome to Jerusalem. Now, St. Helena, if you know, she was the mother of Constantine. And she was Catholic, her daughter was Catholic, and her, the whole family was Catholic, except their husband, who was Emperor Constantine, okay? But fortunately, so this is Constantine's mother. His wife was also Catholic as well. And they, so fortunately, like a good mother did, she convinced him to spend a good chunk of the emperor's money on this pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Constantine did a lot of great things. So if you remember, the Christians were persecuted terribly in those early centuries. And in Jerusalem, in the Holy Land, they had to hide many of the artifacts, these sites of Jesus' life and so forth. So they hid them or they got destroyed. So a lot of things were lost. Meanwhile, now it's 319. Constantine becomes the new emperor. He doesn't become a Catholic, but he allows Christianity to be practiced. Persecutions are ended, the Edict of Milan, and this makes a big change. So not only does he end the persecutions, he now starts building churches. So we know in Rome, that's a whole other topic, built the 4 main basilicas of St. Peter, St. Paul, St. Mary Major, and St. John Lateran. So those are all under Constantine's. So those 4 basilicas still in Rome today go back to the 4th century and Constantine. Helena takes off with a whole crusade, and she's not a crusade, but a whole group of entourage, I should say, and she heads over to Jerusalem in the Holy Land because they've heard that no one has been there from Rome. Remember now the church is developing in Rome. No one's been there to bring back any news of this. So she goes there and decides to just see what was there. And the great news was, briefly, is that she discovered that the Christians had saved a lot of these places. They either just covered them, buried them, or saved artifacts. So St. Helena, she loved collecting things. So she brought back a couple truckloads of relics. She's a role model for me. So she goes and she brings back truckloads of these amazing relics, and most of them are in Rome. I mean, we're talking about, the spear that pierced him, the crown of thorns, the nails, big chunks of the actual cross itself. So she does all of this, and she goes to the Christians there, and she says, she's got to get back to Rome and be a mom over this man Constantine. But she says, I want you to now go throughout the Holy Land and start remembering where Jesus did this and this and this, and start, now that Christianity is allowed, to preserve these places. So like the place where the wedding in Cana was and so forth. So she encouraged the Christians to now make these stationary places where Jesus had been. And so now all of a sudden you have stations of the cross throughout all the Holy Land. Every place Jesus had been becomes sort of stations that the early Christians are now able to sort of recover, rebuild. Again, then they were all destroyed again with various wars, sadly. So the Christians were not in the Holy Land for hundreds and hundreds of years. Most of the churches that are there now, some of this goes back to the 4th century. Most of the churches now, if you go to the Beatitudes, some of you have been there, they're all built in like the 1930s. Okay, so that's how recent. So you get there, don't expect like these old churches. Some of them were built in the 60s, like over some of these churches. So that was because they were all just destroyed, and the Franciscans went back there and restored all of these places. So Helena makes this, and really is the one that sort of starts the introduction of like stations, meaning places where Jesus had been, and thus now we call it the Holy Land. And like I said, then the Christians started going places to Nazareth and Bethlehem and Cana and Sermon on the Mount and so forth. So, but this particular church called the Holy Sepulchre, because at first there was just a little church built over the site of the actual resurrection, the empty tomb. So there's a little church here. Well, it's interesting that if you think about it, where Jesus was buried in the garden it was right at the base of Calvary. So Calvary's on a hill, right? And then he was buried in the garden. We're about to hear all of this coming up on Good Friday, Palm Sunday, just buried in the garden. Well, the garden was at the base of this little hill here. So they decided to preserve Calvary too, and now this great big church is over the resurrection and Calvary together. So it's, when you go in this church, get ready for your head to just like be spinning. Because first you also have 4 different religions inside this church. So the Protestants get a section, the Orthodox get a section, and then then 2 other forms of Christians get there. The Catholics get 1 section there. The picture to the right, if you will, see that little circular place? That is the original Holy Sepulchre Church built in the 4th century. And inside of it, I'm still on the left-hand side there, the little circle where all the people are gathered outside. Inside of it is where the empty tomb is, and you can get about 5 to 10 people max in there at a time. So people are always kind of waiting to go inside. It was recently just restored a few years ago, so I can't wait to someday, hopefully, pray that we can go back to Jerusalem safe again. To the left is a picture inside that same church. You go up these stairs, and there's an altar. Now it's covered in gold and candles and all kinds of things and mosaics. It's actually at the place of Calvary, his actual death. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. For those who have been there, to have Mass, the sacrifice of the Mass, which we enter into Jesus' suffering and death in the Mass, to be there at Calvary it's just a bit overwhelming. I must say that. When we had some pilgrimages, some of our St. Clare people who were on that pilgrimage, a few of you, yes, to the Holy Land there. Powerful. So you got these, and so there's just a lot going on inside that church. It's really beautiful, but I think it's important because this is station number 14. When you end the Stations of the Cross in Jerusalem, this is where you pray Station 14 because you're literally at Calvary at this moment there. Really kind of powerful. Any questions so far? Kind of buzzing through. Yes, Bonnie. So National Geographic did a documentary on this church, kind of objectively identifying this really was Golgotha, the place where people were crucified, and the tomb there as well. There was another question over here. Yeah, fortunately, there's some great things out there now. You can watch YouTubes and videos on these churches as well. So now let's move, but I want you to kind of see where the stations sort of end up at the Holy Sepulchre and giving some credit to St. Helena as well. So now let's just talk a little bit more about the history of the stations as well. So when the early Christians started devotion, with Helena's encouragement, they started to, basically they're 3rd generation, but then remember, well, first of all, parts of Pontius Pilate's palace is still there, and then they were able to track where he would have walked, a normal walk from the house of Pontius Pilate to Golgotha, the place of the skull, where all crucifixions of criminals took place, the majority of them there. So they started tracking these places along the way. Interestingly, as I always like to give credit to this other woman. I give credit to Helena, give credit to this woman who was a journalist in the 4th century. Her name was Egeria, if you've ever heard of her before. Egeria, she was a journalist, and she also had heard about this. She'd become a Christian. She heard about all these great things that were happening in the Holy Land there. So she takes off and goes over there, and she does a journal of what she experienced and saw the Christians doing there. We still have her journal today. Thank you, Egeria. And journalists. Journalism is so important, documenting the truth. She writes down the description of these Christians making a Stations of the Cross. Again, you got to still think outside of the church is the way we think of them. Walking this path that Jesus walked, because they still had remnants of Pontius Pilate's house. So she gets there, she's in her journal, we still have it straight. She writes, she was from France, by the way, and she describes, I got there and there's this pilgrimage, this 4th century, and she goes, it was led by a bishop, there were like 200 people, it's on Holy Thursday. She goes and she writes in her journal, she's like, they start out in Gethsemane at the place where Jesus starts his agony, and then she tracked them as they're walking, as if she's doing a video of where they all walk to next. So it's a beautiful little, her own handwritten explanation of that. So she gives us that. And then the pilgrims, this becomes an actual path, meaning it was a fixed route. Like these are the places that we can sort of verify that Jesus actually was, or we believe he was there from Pontius Pilate's house up to Calvary. And then that same route from that time that they developed, by this time it's about the 6th century, that's still the exact same path that pilgrims make today. And part of our group went there. That was in 2009, I think, that our parish went there. Was it? Was it about 2009, somebody? Remember, you don't remember, so long ago. And that path is called the Via Doloroso, the path of suffering. So it's another way to call the Stations of the Cross, Doloroso, or the path of sorrows, if you will. Sorrowful way is another way to think about it. So this Via Doloroso, so it goes through Jerusalem, and they're really, most of the places, we wish there was like a little chapel at all these stations, but like this one, it just has, and then just has a number, station number blank, on a wall of a building, you know. And so, it's a little off-putting at first. Like, you think you're going to go there for this really amazingly spiritual little chapels and images of the faith, and they're just little numbers on the wall. Like, here's where he fell, you know, station number 3 as well. And so you're walking as a pilgrim doing this Via Doloroso, and this is what you have to walk through. So, it's the market, it's the street. It's the main path that he would have walked on. Now, I'd be a little funny. This is what happened when our group was there. This section here wasn't the exact one we were in, but it was close by. It happened to be, it was the lady lingerie section. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. So we were trying to pray this station, and there's tables and tables and tables and tables of the ladies' lingerie. Enough said. So, like I said, you got to pray the stations where you're at. And so we put our things down in our little booklet and we prayed that station, you know. And I'm thinking of the women of Jerusalem, you know, so that we're happened to be there that day. So I'm just kind of putting reality to this situation that this is the path, this is the road that was there, and it's still there today, about 2,000 years later. Okay, so we're going to jump forward now. This is all Jerusalem, okay, and this is those first 4 centuries. So we're going to move forward now, and now we're going to go beyond Jerusalem. And the Franciscans began spreading this devotion throughout Europe, particularly outdoors. So no Stations of the Cross are in churches yet. Now I'm talking about, this is about the 14th, Francis, 12th century. So he promoted a lot of devotion. If you remember, we promoted big here, being a Franciscan parish. He wanted the poor people of the land, all of us, who couldn't read or write, to develop a relationship with Jesus. And so remember, he developed the first nativity scene. And he's like, I just want you to know that he was a baby, and there were animals around him, and there were wise men and shepherds, and it was stinky and all that sort of thing. So he created the first live manger scene, nativity set, if you will. So we give him a lot of credit, and we hang our big oil painting there. So Francis was really promoting a lot of devotional lives because he realized by this time, where the church was at with Mass, that the people were sort of left out of how we were sort of praying the Mass then, as reverent as it was. So he developed more of these devotions to help people relate to Jesus and get a personal encounter experience with him. So he started promoting, reflecting on Jesus' birth, the nativity primarily, but then he's like, let's also think about and meditate on his journey to Calvary, and the resurrection. So the Franciscans kind of took off with that, and then by the 14th century, they start, because the Franciscans now are spreading throughout Europe, and then they start spreading this devotion and setting up these little shrines outside. And if you've been to Europe especially, they have these wonderful little grottos on the mountainsides, and wherever you're at, they're wonderful. Some of them are big chapels, some are just little signs there as well. And it inspired me, having seen a variety of these in Europe, our own stations of the cross, outdoor stations of the cross at the school chapel. If you've never been there, I really challenge you to get there before or sometime this Lenten season yet, because we created a similar thing. One of our parishioners created these wonderful little wooden grottos on their porcelain tiles of the stations, all these beautiful flowers. It's going to warm up by Wednesday. You can be out there. But we designed that kind of on these original first stations, official stations that the Franciscans had developed in the 15th century there. Now, interestingly enough, as this was still being developed in those early centuries, really all the way up to about the 17th century, there weren't just 14. There were anywhere from 7 to 34. Depending on where you're at, they started reflecting on different encounters Jesus would have had with people. So they were all over the place. It really wasn't until about the 17th century that the church came up with 14 specific ones that have been handed down by traditions. You know, some of them that aren't in the Bible, but traditions that the early Christians did. Let's just say Veronica wiping the face of Jesus. That was such a strong tradition early in the early church. And now in the 17th century, as Catholic churches were being built more, now Stations of the Cross come in the church. And that was sort of how they chose to limit it to sort of 14. But that's the first time that they're coming into the church in the 1600s, 17th century. Any questions on that little brief history? We're going to move to some spirituality now. Okay, so that was a crash course in overview. Now I'm going to move to a little bit of part of the Station of the Cross here at St. Clare. I talked a little bit about this in the YouTube video Stephen Arrows helped me make. During COVID, we did YouTube videos. We have 11 of them on the artwork, art and architecture of the church. If you haven't seen them, not because I'm in them, but they're really an explanation of how we design this church and what the art means and its connection to history and all that sort of thing. So there's 11 specific ones on 11 pieces of art and areas of our church, and one of those on the Stations of the Cross. So anyway, some of this you could see in that video if you want to look at it as well. So let's start with here at St. Clare. So, because some of you haven't been around all that long, but when we commissioned this woman, Meltem Actis, to be the iconographer for our stations. So she's from Chicago. She's originally from Turkey, so she was trained in Turkish and Orthodox iconography in her home in Istanbul growing up, and her degree is in that as well. And she moves to Chicago. She becomes this, specific. Her main patron is the Jesuits of Chicago. So she does iconography all through all the Jesuit churches and schools up in Chicago. You'll see her work. So I was blessed to meet her through a friend and discover her amazing work. So we commissioned her here because I just had come in touch with her spirituality. And I just wanted somebody that I knew who was really going to pray into these icons. And if you know anything about iconography, which is used in the Orthodox Church and Eastern Church Catholics as well, iconography is, to them, is like a rosary. It's a meditation that you, in front of an icon takes you into the mystery. So like a rosary, meditated, it should take me into Jesus carrying the cross, into his scourging, or into his resurrection. So meditating on it takes me into the experience. For the Eastern Catholics and Orthodox, icons do that. They have the rosary too, a version of the rosary, but they will look at a piece of artwork, and when they go into the icon, when they're sitting in front of it and praying it, they go, praying an icon, you go into it. And you should sort of merge your life with the experience of what's going on in the icon life. It's a saint of Jesus, or the Virgin Mary, whatever it is. So that's what iconography does. The piece itself is a form of meditation. So they're meant to be sat in front of and meditated upon. So she and I spent a lot of time talking about, as I said earlier, the Paschal Mystery. I said, I'm going to tell you some stories of our parishioners as they don't call it painting them, as they pray an icon. So you don't paint an icon, you pray it. So they're literally praying. She makes her own tempera. She gets her blue lapis lazuli from Istanbul. So she mixes these powders into an egg tempera and all that sort of a thing. But they're praying the whole time you're doing that. So I shared with her a lot of stories about our parishioners who were going through sufferings and stations of the cross as well. So I gave her those stories. I said, I want you to be praying about these people as you're praying into your icon and creating these experiences, and also just general suffering. So people condemned to prison, I said, I want you to be thinking about our specific prisons in Southern Illinois and people who, many of them, condemned unjustly. So she put a lot into it of praying the stations as well. So entering into it. So when you're in front of an icon, it's meant to try to have the emotional experience and go into it. You see what I'm saying? And when we were designing the church, we brought her on before we could even afford to hire her for the icons, and they were generously paid for by benefactors in the parish. Before we could hire her, we couldn't afford Stations of the Cross, so we had wooden ones, some of you remember, for a while, which were beautiful. But while we were doing that, we still had her design the actual niche. So even though we don't have your artwork yet, tell us what the niche should be like, the size, when it built into the wall. So if you notice in the stations that each one is meant to be like its own little grotto. Like you go into it by the way it's framed, not just stuck on a wall as a piece of artwork. And the shelf and so forth, so all that's meant to be its own little grotto. So 14 grottos as well. Now I wish we had a place to put like a chair in front of each of those so people could just sit down for it. But what I'm inviting you to do is to do that on your own, to go and spend time in front of some of these one by one, whichever one sort of speaks to you, which is kind of what I'm going to get to. So what I'm going to do is just do a little experience with these now. And meaning, because in case you haven't spent time with them, I'm assuming most of us haven't, really spent time with one of them. I'm going to have a little experience of praying with these. And I have some music on, and it's going to have an image up there. And then I want you to be thinking about if it was the actual icon in front of you. So turn your chairs to the screens if you're not now. And so that you can, just for 5 or so minutes, we're going to pray with us, just 3 of our stations. I picked 3. To help you learn how to sit with an icon and enter into this mystery. And I'm also just going to have a little music, but then I'm going to, after we sit with it in silence, I'm going to pray a little bit in case you haven't been to the choir's going to do beautiful stations this Friday, but we have our own station prayer book. I composed the prayers for each of these stations many years ago. And I'm just going to read just a little excerpt from here, from our St. Clare stations of the book, while you're meditating on it. You got me here? So just kind of go with me here. So we're going to enter into a little prayer for a moment here, and we'll be ready. Mary models true discipleship in how she stayed by Jesus' side. She did not walk away in fear like the other disciples did. She stayed with Jesus as his mother, but also as a faithful follower of his example of compassion. She could not carry his cross for him, but certainly her presence there as a parent gave him strength. Mary models for all mothers how to comfort their children when they are suffering and struggling. She models for all disciples how to unite our own suffering to the heart of Jesus, and how to compassionately stay by the side of someone who needs our help. Like Mary, we sometimes find ourselves with others during difficult times. And at those times, we can be witnesses of Christ's love and compassion. God our Father, be near to us as we try to follow Jesus' example of selflessness and unconditional love. When our own crosses weigh us down and dying to ourself is demanding, may your Spirit help us unite ourselves more closely to Jesus on the cross. O God, our God, forgive us for those times we know not what we do. The 13th station. Jesus is taken from the cross and placed in the arms of his mother. Mary and only a few of Jesus' friends stayed by his side to the end. Jesus' lifeless body was placed in the arms of his mother. Still today, she embodies the grief of every parent who has lost a child. Here at the foot of the cross, the world stops to acknowledge the immense pain that grief causes for anyone who has lost a loved one. In the midst of such a tragedy, his disciples were wondering what would become of Jesus' vision. Everything felt ruined. It didn't make sense. All they could do now was trust that God would fulfill Jesus' promise to rise from the dead. Many of us know the sufferings that come from a profound loss. The death of a loved one, the death of a dream, or the death of a relationship. But the paschal mystery of Jesus' suffering, death, and resurrection teaches us that death is not the end of the story. For believers, every dying leads to an opportunity for some new beginning and a more abundant life in God. I'm going to gently pull this back into this room. I really meant it when I had these great visits with Meltem, sometimes over Turkish coffee at her house in Chicago. Maybe there was a bottle of wine occasionally. But particularly for those who were around when we built the church and when we could finally afford some of the stations, it would take her 6 to 9 months to paint each one, to pray each one into existence. So we really would just put up one a year, and then we got to 2 a year. So it took that, 7, 8 years to get. But I said, I personally, as a pastor, the very first station I want installed is number 13 of Mother Mary. I said, my own heart as a pastor has most been challenged when helping a parent who's lost a child. And so I told her some stories of people that I knew, and then she and I talked about some death in our own lives. And so I said, I want the very first station to go up is Mary's grief that captures any form of grief, any loss. And so she shared with me how much time she spent just painting the teardrops. You look closely, and it doesn't show up that well in this picture here. So it's just, if you ever need to shed some tears, go sit in front of that 13 station for a while. Whether your loss is in the moment or it has been, spend some time with Mother Mary on how she consoles us in our own grief. So as we think about these experiences and uniting our stations, our life, it's not just about suffering, of course, but we do have to be more in touch with that great passage from Philippians. He emptied himself. He emptied himself and took the form of a slave. Such a powerful passage. And that's what's happening in the stations when we use them as a meditation. Learning from Jesus about this emptying, and you hear the deacons and I preach about this. We're just continually having to empty ourselves because so much of our thoughts are about ourselves, isn't it? So we have to keep emptying ourselves. We have to learn from him. Invite him to walk your stations with you. And then pray. Just pay more attention to how he's at your side in this station, or just from reflecting on past stations in your life where you fell. Because each time we reflect on the image, we see it in a new way. Because whatever station I'm going through now, that's the moment. So when you're praying over a particular image or word, give yourself permission to just stop at one of the stations, which eventually I'd like to make these available, and we have these in our homes, right? My great staff member, Jamae, created them. So she's got the image in there, if you've never seen it before, and then the prayers that I composed. So we'll talk about maybe how we can get you some of those so you can be praying the stations at home, perhaps, too, when you can't make it up here as well. But I just want to invite you to use our stations more regularly as well. And when you're in front of that image, try to identify for yourself. You're going to get to that station, say, this is the station I'm at in my life right now. This is it. I just got condemned by somebody, judged wrongly. I'm going to just sit there with that Jesus being sentenced to death. We could all spend lots of times at each of the stations when he fell. We fall from an addiction or a habit, and we just wonder how we could get up and start again. And sometimes we just need to stop at that third station and just say, I've fallen. Or I've fallen the third time with this habit. And just spend some time with that. And how did you do it? So you can spend an image. Oh, by the way, all of our images are on our website, all the 14 stations and some zeroed in. And so you can pull them up on your screen at home and just sit with it there. Have your own devotion at home. But to think about regularly, what station am I at now? And that's something to bring to Mass with you on Sunday or any time as well. Where are you at in the Paschal mystery that you're going to enter into the liturgy more deeply? So the focus is that, another main point in which to walk away is that these are meditations. So they're not, the stations, they're never an end in themselves. They're meant to help me have a deeper spirituality and prayer life about this is my life. And all this I'm complaining about or going through, it's actually uniting me closer to Jesus. So it's not just, okay, I got the stations done. No, I should have a profound experience on one of those stations, or all 14, how it relates to your life. So the goal of the stations is not to reenact them. I mean, you can act them out, which is our youth do that too, beautifully. But when we're praying them individually, it's not to, and it's definitely not meant to just feel sorry for Jesus and just think about just his suffering there. But as I'm looking at this image of what he's going through at the moment, it's like, oh my gosh, Jesus, when I'm in that moment, I forget that you're right there also. You are Simon or I'm Simon. And it kind of goes back and forth there as well. It's just trying, by praying the stations regularly, not just on Fridays in Lent, that I become more aware of the presence of Jesus in my life, who's right now in the middle of this station challenge that I'm going through. It's amazing. The 14 stations are very alive in your homes. And we have to pay more attention to it. So the stations in a church are meant to help me connect with and have some visual images when I'm going through my own station. Okay, so we got the 14 stations. And what did I say? It flows to the liturgy and from the liturgy. So it's always centered in the Eucharist. So I put two images up there. To the left is a wonderful image of our Easter vigil, of us gathering around the font, the Word, and the Holy Eucharist, when those who are receiving their sacraments, we're all by candlelight. First of all, it's a great commercial. If you've never been to Easter Vigil, be there. You want this candlelight experience and the history of salvation, on and on and on. So I love that because the stations point to that, where the Paschal mystery is lived out fully. Over here is the resurrection, reminding us, I put the two together there because we have to remember that the Mass, the Eucharist, is station 15, the resurrection of Jesus. It is the resurrected Lord who is presiding at Mass. The priest is standing in his place. It's the resurrected Jesus who is there presiding at Mass. It's the resurrected Jesus proclaiming that gospel. It's the resurrected Jesus who's praying the words of consecration. It's the resurrected Jesus who is feeding us with his body and blood. And like the apostles, sometimes we're distracted and we just think it's some stranger along the way, on the way to Emmaus, and finally our eyes are opened up and we recognize when the bread is broken, I've been thinking about my grocery list. I've been thinking about that person over there that's aggravating me. And then if you don't get it at some point, at least think of yourself in Emmaus in the breaking of the bread, which is why that's such an important ritual. Maybe it's at the consecration. Maybe it's at the Amen. But the disciples in Emmaus says, oh my gosh. That's right, he broke bread with us constantly, and Jesus was constantly doing this every time they had meals with him. And so the visual image connected with them as well. So fortunately, we have that story because we find out that the disciples were distracted and worried about themselves and complaining, and they had their own lists as well. But the point is that in the Eucharist, the resurrected Jesus is there, the 15th station. So when we come to Mass then, part of the offertory that we present, pray, brothers and sisters, that my sacrifice and yours will be acceptable to Lord the God, the Father Almighty. What sacrifices are you bringing to the Lord? Pray that my sacrifice and yours. Now, we got the sacrifice we're about to have in front of us here, but it's meant to be, offertory and the procession of all of our gifts represent our sacrifices coming to the Holy Eucharist, meaning the stations. What station/sacrifice have you lived this week? Here's my offering, Jesus. My station this week was this child that I'm working with. I'm dealing with a sick spouse or a parent. I'm dealing with an addiction. I'm dealing with, and I made it through this. And that was the sacrifice I made. And I'm giving it to you, God, because I lived 3 of the 14 stations this week, and I'm bringing them to you. Name your station, name your sacrifice as you're on driving to church sometime in the Mass, so that offertory has your life going to it. Then the Paschal mystery of your life is now merged with the Paschal mystery of Jesus in the Holy Eucharist. You following me here? Is it powerful or what? That's why we say in the Mass, we leave this world and we go into the other dimension of God I talk about all the time. That's the Paschal mystery dimension, that we're going into that. So bring your suffering, death, and resurrection along, and then you're going to be able to participate and get it more of what's happening in the holy sacrifice of the Mass. What did I say is my number one dream at homily last Sunday? You are so good. You were, and that you're a lot of work. I didn't want to call you out specifically, Carl. So I said some of you are a lot of work. No. Yeah, I know, the things you listen to, it's amazing. Don says you're a great listener. It's his wife. So heaven is our ultimate goal, of course. So how do we get there? Living like Jesus. And the stations of the cross devotion, taking us back to where I started, are meant to help us understand the stations of our lives, connect them to Him, bring them to Christ. And every time that I'm not just living my stations, but I'm helping someone else. So whether you need a Simon helping you carry the cross, or you are the Simon, whether you are the Veronica or somebody's wiping your face, all of that is this communion of saints that we're participating in. And so the communion of saints, what's so beautiful about it is that we're going to get to see everybody who's been a part of my stations of the cross. And the people that, most of them, we don't even know how we've walked with somebody in their station. We do not know the impact and influence we have on other people and the opportunities we have in our rushed, busy times. That person is going to be there in heaven and say, you were Veronica for me. I don't even ever remember meeting you. And the joy of heaven is going to be there when we're going to, all of our stations of the cross and stations of resurrection are going to come together in this beatific vision, we call it, the blessed vision as well. It's a beautiful journey we're on, isn't it? We've got challenges in our world, challenges in our personal lives. But the stations of the cross flowing to and from the Eucharist are meant to help enrich our lives and enrich our spirituality and enrich our personal relationship with Jesus. And I really hope tonight helps make that for you. I hope you're going to have a more regular taking time. Visit one station on a Sunday. Just in 14 weeks, and go before you get to Mass. Go pick one and go to that. On your home, put them up on your computer. Maybe for the rest of Lent, do the 14 stations. Have them up on your screen, TV or your computer, and let them be your meditation. Pick at least one of them. Just pick one of. What station are you at this time in your life, this Lent? What station are you at? It's a beautiful station you're at, because Christ is with you, and it's adding meaning to your life, depth in relationship with Jesus. Because if we're not working on a relationship with Jesus, then what is all this, right? I say that. That's what St. Clare's Parish is about, is we're here to help your spirituality, your relationship with Jesus Christ, and your goal of heaven. You ready for a closing prayer song together? Right? So we sing this also when we do our Stations Book here. You know the tune. So we're going to take up your cross. So we're going to sing this together as part of our closing prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Take up your cross, the Savior said, if you would my disciple be. Take up your cross with willing heart, and humbly follow after me. Take up your cross, let not its weight fill your weak spirit with alarm. Christ's strength shall bear your spirit up, and brace your heart and nerve your arm. Take up your cross then in Christ's strength, and calmly every danger brave. It guides you to abundant life, and leads to victory o'er the grave. Amen. What a great choir you are. Stephen, you got new recruits tonight. Okay. Do you have room for the choir? Any more additional members?
No, we need room, though.
Did he just announce a dream? He just announced a dream. We're so blessed that our choir is overflowing. It cannot even fit in the choir room anymore. Our youth can't fit in their room. We talked about this, so we have some challenges and some dreaming together, right? And it is part of the Paschal mystery. So I was going to do a closing prayer and blessing over you. Ellen, any further announcements? Oh, okay. So I'm not going to do it. Okay, sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
First of all, thank you so much. What a powerful way to end this series. For sure. Hopefully, this Lenten journey was, inspired by these devotional nights that we did through this series. Hopefully, they helped you on your Lenten journey. With that, what else did I want to say? That was so powerful. Next Monday night there's Mass at 6 o'clock. There's not an evening. So we can't have dinner together. I'm sorry. But there is Mass at 6 p.m. That's it. And then what else do we have here? Again, the collection is for CRS. And besides the postcards that are on your table for the choir, Stations of the Cross, there's also a sheet on your table for kind of continuing this whole devotional emphasis we had. There's a program based in St. Louis called Wear and Give that focuses on the miraculous medal. So that whole team will be coming over here and presenting. I think it's April 16th. It's for men and women, junior high children and above. So take a look at that. It's also going to be in the bulletin every weekend. And I think that's it. So you're going to do a blessing. Okay.
We did a prayer together, but we do another little blessing on your way out. And even this 100% German can get a little Irish. My mom tells me I have to be a little Irish as well. So I thought we'd just a closing prayer on the vigil of St. Patrick, right? Who was a great model of faith and challenges and brought the Catholic faith to Ireland and helped their very struggling life to connect with Christ as well. So he did so much missionary work, St. Patrick. So we have to think about, sometimes we forget our saints when they turn into holidays of corned beef. We forget why we're really honoring this person. So think about his missionary work as we begin the vigil and tomorrow as well. So let us bow our heads for God's blessing. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and soft rains upon your field. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. May God hold you in the palm of his hand. And may God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Safe drive home. Good evening.